Okay, I mean, the context of this game, my team, AFC Eskilstuna, were playing Malmo, who were the reigning league champions and running away with the league at this stage of the season. I think to this point they'd just lost the one game. I'd recently taken over AFC and we were still bottom of the table at this point, trying to fight against relegation. I think we'd won one or two games ourselves by this point in the season, but it was very much a David versus Goliath matchup. And I think Malmo came to us expecting to win. The previous week we'd played AIK Stockholm in Friends Arena, and they played a particular way, and we decided to match up man for man in midfield and invite one of their back players to bring the ball forwards and see if we could steal the ball and then counter-attack, because we had some effective counter-attacking players. And it worked pretty well. We got a draw in Friends Arena, and when we thought about this Malmo game, we thought the concept of playing man for man was a worthwhile one, and perhaps one we could even extend to playing all over the pitch man for man. So Malmo were an interesting team. They're one of those teams that you could quite clearly see what it was they were trying to do, but it was very difficult to stop it, and they went on to win the league pretty comfortably in the end. But essentially, when Malmo took possession of the ball, I mean, notionally they were a 4-4-2 out of possession, but when they took possession, they'd always send up one full-back, usually the right back, and he would go nice and high on his side, and that would trigger the wide player on that side to come in field and try and overload centrally. The two strikers, one would stretch the pitch, I guess a number 9 you might say, and the other would drop down into almost like a number 10 position. They'd keep their width on the opposite side of the field with the wide player and the full back, and then the two midfield players would slide over and operate in the space that had been vacated by the right back. So they came off their shape in quite a fixed way, if you like, when they took possession of the ball. I'm not quite sure what you'd describe that shape as, but they were certainly fluid within their movement. And when we looked at it, we decided our best way of countering that would be to try and match up man for man. So essentially what we did was we said, okay, the right back that's coming forward, we're going to have somebody track him all the way and play man for man against him. We're going to man mark the number 9. We're going to man mark the wide player on this side. We're going to man mark the 10 that drops into the space. The two midfield players, we're going to man mark both of those. The wide player that comes inside, we're going to man mark him. And the fullback on this side, we're going to kind of semi-man mark him, because we're not sure, with the right back going, we're not quite sure that he's going to come so far, which left us with two players. So we played with a spare player, effectively a sweeper at the back, a spare player, and one striker that was playing 2v1 against the two Malmo centre-backs. So the game actually was just a series of one-for-one matchups with a 2 versus 1 here and a spare player for us here. And we were as literal as saying to our players, if your player goes right the way across the side of the pitch, then you stay with him. Obviously, it's relative to the ball, because if the ball is further away, you would adjust your distance so that you could still have some effect on the travel or the movement of the ball. But fundamentally, it was about playing man for man all over the pitch, with a spare player whose responsibility was to read and assess situations as they developed and step in as appropriate or drop off as appropriate. The fantastic thing for us, or the last part of the plan, I suppose, was to try and leave one of the Malmo centre-backs who wasn't as comfortable in possession of the ball on the ball. So we decided the right-sided centre-back was slightly less familiar at carrying the ball forward and finding and making passes. So we spoke to this player and said, try and leave the ball mostly on this right side. And what actually ended up happening was he was bringing the ball forward and faced with this scenario where literally every one of his teammates was man-marked, and he didn't really have a pass, so his options were to just keep going into a network of players and come further out of position, or to make a pass to somebody that was fairly tightly marked and risk turning the ball over. And in the first half especially, it worked really, really well. We had a number of counter-attacks. We gave all of our man-marking players license that if they did win the ball in front of their opponent, they had the licence basically to go on an attack and travel and combine and connect with the other players from that position. So it was really a case of trying to block them by playing man for man, steal the ball and counter-attack quickly. And we had two players in particular, Mohamed Bouyatarai and Omar Adari, who were extremely effective counter-attacking players. They scored both the goals for us, and we found ourselves 3-0 ahead against the league champions after 30 minutes. So from a coaching perspective, it worked extremely well, and we managed to see the game out in the second half. Yeah, so the first goal was a really good example, I think, of what we were trying to do. So Malmo had possession of the ball and played into the middle third, and we managed to steal the ball and then break from that position. So, as I've mentioned, we gave our players license to attack freely on those moments when we stole the ball. And on this particular occasion, the ball was fed outside to our right back, who by now was able to leave the guy who was marking because we had possession. And he was particularly adept at gaining territory and carrying the ball up the field for us, Daniel Bjornquist. He carried the ball, and we had this freedom of movement for our attacking players. So Mohamed Bouyatarai, basically our instructions to him were to play in between the centre-backs and try and get in between them, in the middle of them as often as possible. And Omar was in the space between the right-sided centre-back and the right-back to try and stretch the back four. So, you know, when the cross was delivered, it was a terrific ball into the box, and Mohamed Bouyatarai was in the middle of the goal where he's supposed to be, right between the centre-backs, and the technique of the header was first class. So, you know, the fact that we got that early goal and we got ourselves 1-0 in front after 4 minutes, I think it gave everyone the belief that what we were trying could work. You know, and it gave us the strength, I think, to stick with it and keep going with it. And then within another 25 minutes, we were 3 up. But certainly this first goal was really important in setting the tone for the whole performance.